Oh, yeah, do I have a good one for you today. It's David Cay Johnston joining me, the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, talks about Trump Bart Due. Nobody knows Trump better than David Cay Johnston. Great conversation with him. It begins at 35 minutes. But first, as always, I've got your good stuff, little hope, happiness, and inspiration to get your day started. Then headlines, clips, and my conversation with David Cay Johnston. You want to skip the good stuff? Get right to the headlines. That starts at about 9 minutes, 30 seconds today. Thanks so much to everybody who joined me at the Hangout. We had about 50 people there for about an hour and a half. Lots of fun, great conversations. We talked about some important stuff, some goofy stuff, and more. If you want to watch the Hangout, there's a link to it in today's subscriber email. And if you're not already a paid subscriber, go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick right now. Also, join us in Las Vegas. We're all getting together March 28th to 30th in Las Vegas, a 3-day experience filled with fun and some of your favorite stand-up guests. Go click on the ticket link and join us. Should be a great, great time. Really looking forward to seeing you out there, but get your tickets now so we know how many people are coming and we can accommodate it all and do everything that needs to be done for it. Pod Jam 2. All right, well, let's get started with today's installment of The Good Stuff. Yeah, like I said, I like to read, write, exercise, and meditate every day that I can. I don't do all of them every day, but I certainly do try to. Had a nice meditation by the river the other day. I just sat there and tried to get focused and get centered, and I did for about 10 minutes until this woman who was like behind me, like 10 feet behind me, would not stop playing with her kids. And I was just thinking, it's a big park. There's a lot of space. You see me sitting here, and yet you won't go anywhere else. And it was the antithesis of what I was trying to achieve with my meditation. I finally stopped being a dick to myself and this poor lady who was enjoying her kids, and sat there and enjoyed my meditation without being too distracted, too concerned by anything else around me. That's the whole goal, right? Well, also, I like to read a lot of philosophy is my main thing, and I think it's very important because I want to become a better person, you know? And that's what a lot of philosophy is. Here is Ryan Halliday, who we love, talking about what Stoicism is, what Stoic philosophy is. And sorry, Paul Wesley, they put audio behind it. There's nothing I can do about it. He emailed me yesterday and said, we don't need the music. I didn't add the music. I swear. It was just 2 minutes.
What's the point of philosophy? It's not big words you can't pronounce. It's not impressing people. It's not getting a tenured chair at a university. The point of philosophy, to the Stoics anyway, the point of philosophy is to become a better person. If you're studying philosophy for any other reason, you're wasting your time. Seneca says, what does philosophy offer? It offers counsel. It offers instruction in how to be a better person. And I don't just mean that in terms of improving yourself physically or mentally, just becoming smarter and stronger. It's about becoming a better human being, a better member of the human race. There's this amazing story about Marcus Aurelius. He's been the emperor for decades, and he's seen exiting the palace. And a friend sees him and he says, Marcus, where are you going? And Marcus says, I'm off to see Sextus the philosopher to learn that which I do not yet know. And the friend is amazed and he says, by God, the emperor is still picking up his tablets and going to school. All of the Stoics had these great teachers. They didn't just read about Stoicism. It was an active practice, a lifelong education that they were engaged in. They had teachers, they went to classes, they read books, and they tried to learn these lessons from their actual life and apply them. Seneca says we learn as we teach as well. So we've been hard at work at this new course. We're calling it Stoicism 101, Ancient Philosophy for Your Actual Life.
Yeah, I love it. You could take that course with Ryan Halliday at dailystoic.com, which is something I visit every day. Do you think Marcus really left the palace and someone's like, hey, Marcus? I mean, isn't he the emperor? Don't they call him something else, like Your Highness or something? They just called the emperor by his first name. He's like, I'm off to learn more things. All right, see you later, Marcus. I'm just mowing my lawn. All right, so that's a little bit from the Daily Stoic. I like Stoicism, and I like Buddhism. Those are my two kind of disciplines. What am I missing? What are the different kinds of philosophies and thoughts that I'm missing? Do you like this segment? Are you enjoying it? Do you get something out of it? I hope you do. I always still feel weird and uncomfortable doing the good stuff, but I'm enjoying putting it together because I'm constantly trying to learn and relearn things myself. One way I do that is through meditation, which I mentioned earlier. I try to do it daily. I try to do it first thing in the morning, and I try to do it for about 20 minutes. And one of the people I learned meditation from, and I've had a few different teachers, including from the Transcendental Meditation Center, Bob Roth himself, not Ross, Roth at the David Lynch Transcendental Meditation Center. Anyway, I don't do that kind of meditation anymore, which requires you kind of have a mantra, a sound, a word that you say along with it. Sometimes I do it and I employ it. I have all different combinations, but Sam Harris is that teacher I was telling you about. Whether you like his views on politics or not, he can be controversial at times. He is an expert on this issue, and here he is explaining why meditation is so important and how to feel more connected to yourself and others. A couple minutes or less with Sam Harris. You might need to listen to this twice. I did.
Virtually everyone, this basic incapacity to break the spell of identification with thought and just rest attention as consciousness in the present moment. Meditation is simply the act of doing that. Meditation is the ability to look at this thing you thought was your ego, that you thought was yourself, and not find it in a way that actually relieves you of the problem of egocentricity for that moment. In the beginning, it might only last a moment, and then you'll be lost in thought again. But the question is, once you learn to meditate, the question is always, what do you do next? And if you don't know how to meditate, well, you're just going to helplessly be thinking that thought. And you'll think it for as long as you'll think it, and it'll, make you angry or sad or regretful or whatever, depending on its contents. But once you know how to meditate, you can recognize thoughts as thoughts, and they just arise and disappear in this wider space of awareness, and you locate your well-being in that space as that space.
If you were thinking about trying meditation or going back to it, now is the time. How about it? Today's your reminder. Today is your day. I got a nice email from Carlo about trying to find some YouTube videos that help with meditation for his daughter and for anybody. And I would, again, recommend Sam Harris, but there are so many good ones out there. I'm going to try to find some and send you some, Carlo. I'll get back to you on that. But if anybody has any suggestions, or if you just want me to move on to the next thing, that's fine too. Okay, what is that next thing on the good stuff? How about this? Introduced you to Dr. James Doty from Stanford University yesterday. Turns out he's kind of a big social media star, this older gentleman. And I really like this. Again, even though it's got music behind it, this is 10 letters to start your day right, and I thought it was helpful.
Hi, I'd like to share with you a practice that I do every day. When I wake up in the morning, I sit by the side of the bed. I begin a brief breathing exercise. I think of the joy and awe of being in this world. And then I go through an exercise that involves 10 letters of the alphabet. C, compassion for self and others. D, recognizing the dignity of every person. E, practicing equanimity or evenness of temperament. F, practicing forgiveness. G, having gratitude. H, having humility. J, justice, our responsibility to care for the vulnerable. K, practicing kindness. All contained by love.
Well, there you go. Dr. James Doty. Look him up. Compassion, dignity, equanimity, forgiveness, gratitude, humility, justice, kindness. I wrote it down on a little card. I'm going to put it next to my bed, and I'm going to give it a shot myself. All right, well, that's today's shot of the good stuff. I hope you appreciated it. I hope you liked it. If not, well, you can always skip ahead because I told you when the news is going to start. The headlines begin right now. The big story yesterday overall, I guess, is that after the 5-day manhunt, police arrested this kid they're calling a strong person of interest in connection with the brazen killing of the CEO of one of the most hated companies in the country, United Health Insurance, on the street of Midtown Manhattan. Of course, his name is Luigi Mangione. 26 years old. He was taken into custody at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, near the capital there, in western Pennsylvania, near Harrisburg, near where Mara Quint lives. I wonder if she was nearby or even purchasing something at that McDonald's. That would be something. The local authorities were alerted to the man's whereabouts by an employee at the McDonald's who recognized him from photos shared by the police. Now, I think he should get the reward, right? Employees making him minimum wage, and now he's getting like $50,000, I hope. I'm going to follow up on that. Law enforcement says that Mangione, who I think might be Italian, was carrying a so-called ghost gun with a silencer. Some are saying he might have made it on a 3D printer. He also had a fake ID matching the one that used by the suspected gunman, and a handwritten manifesto criticizing healthcare companies for putting profits above care. He was born and raised in Maryland, lived in San Francisco and Honolulu, Hawaii. Apparently, he attended a private school in Baltimore growing up. He was a wrestler. He graduated as the valedictorian in 2016. He graduated high school. And in a related story, when it comes to healthcare, apparently a new poll, 62% of Americans think it's the federal government's responsibility to make sure that all Americans have healthcare coverage, while 44% say the quality of their healthcare is excellent, and 11% or good say it's 33%. So I don't know if anybody knows what the hell they're talking about, but I thought that was interesting just to add to that. And now on to a much more impactful and important story, unless somehow the killing of this healthcare CEO impacts the conversation around healthcare, and maybe it will. I'm going to reach out to Wendell Potter, Jonathan Cohn, and some other healthcare experts, of course, Dr. Aaron Carroll, and more to renew the conversation about healthcare and see if there's any idea, any interest, any motivation for legislation or any new reforms. But the big story otherwise is international, and it, of course, is the rebels that ended the Assad family's regime in Syria. Well, they began asserting control yesterday over the capital, Damascus. Fighters took up positions outside public buildings and directed traffic along city roads. They announced that a new government would begin working immediately. Major questions, of course, remain unanswered, including who the hell is going to be in charge with leading the country as the world is processing the stunning end to the Assad 5-decade rule and euphoria around the ouster of President Bashar al-Assad over the weekend was mixed with, of course, tremendous uncertainty about the country's future. New York Times says, and other outlets, reporters who've entered the country from Lebanon saw abandoned Syrian military tanks, empty checkpoints, and many signs of lawlessness along the main highway of Damascus. And Assad's grip over Syria was once visible everywhere in the capital, and now it was like basically dismantled in less than 24 hours. Have you seen all of these statues being taken down? It is a new day in Syria. What does it mean? Jubilant Syrians waving flags clambered Monday onto a government tank abandoned in the capital city main square and took selfies. Others defaced or tore down the omnipresent portraits of ousted President Bashar al-Assad from government buildings. At the same time, hundreds of Syrian exiles streamed back into the country from Lebanon through unguarded border crossings. And now let's head to South Korea, where a plan to impeach the president over his short-lived declaration of martial law failed yesterday after members of his governing party left parliament on Saturday ahead of the planned vote. Lawmakers from the People Power Party, PPP, were shouted and cursed at as they left en masse after voting on a separate motion, leaving the 192 opposition lawmakers 8 votes short of the two-thirds majority needed for the impeachment motion to succeed. The South Korean government also ordered an overseas travel ban on the president as he faces investigation on possible rebellion charges over a short-lived martial law declaration that, of course, plunged South Korea into chaos last week. So continue to follow that one as well. And let's stay with international news and head over to Iran, where they are accelerating their nuclear program. United Nations chief nuclear inspector said on Friday that Iran was quadrupling its production of near-bomb-grade material, whatever the hell that is, a move likely to intensify the challenge it will pose to the incoming Trump administration, but one that might also open a way to a new negotiation with the West. A lot to talk about on the issue of what's happening in Iran now, and should probably get Robin Wright. Haven't talked to her in a long time. She's always the best. Now let's head over to Haiti, where the UN human rights chief said that more than 180 people have been killed in a massacre, one of the poorest neighborhoods of Port-au-Prince. the capital. Terrible story coming out of Haiti. And in the Dominican Republic, which is part of the same island, officials are deporting up to 10,000 Haitians a week back to their troubled country, many in cage-like trucks, 2 reports from the New York Times. But now let's come home to domestic news and America. What's happening in America? First with politics. All right, here we go. Let's just talk about what Trump's doing. He chose his lawyer, Alina Habba, to be a counselor to the president, so she's got a job in the administration now. He's also reportedly mulling for Border Hawk, whatever the hell that job is. Carrie Lake, the failed gubernatorial candidate, failed senator, former newswoman, she's going to be maybe the ambassador to Mexico, so that makes a tremendous amount of sense, so she can just agitate them and destroy whatever relationship we have left with Mexico and make fake threats that she can't follow through on. Also, on Trump news, a key GOP Republican Senator, Joni Ernst, who just days ago we thought would no way she would support Pete Hegseth, now declaring she will support Pete Hegseth for Department of Defense. So he might be making a comeback. Let's take a look. Let's go to North Carolina, where a Democrat won a seat on the state's Supreme Court by 734 votes. Wow. A Republican opponent wants to now disqualify 60,000 ballots, so pay attention to that story. Lara Trump, that's Trump's son Eric's wife. She was running the RNC, but now she's resigned because it looks like the governor of Florida is going to appoint her to fill the Senate seat vacated by Marco Rubio. Was that the move all the time? Move Rubio into the State Department as Secretary of State and get himself a family member in the U.S. Senate that he can trust. Wow. Well, that seems fair and normal. Totally normal. Also, Trump appointed venture capitalist and podcaster David Sachs as the White House AI and crypto czar to guide policies on artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and whatever else. That guy's a real terrible person, so that's not great. Now let's go to some media story. This is Rupert Murdoch, whose upper body we really love. He failed in his bid to alter a family trust to consolidate his empire under his son Lachlan and lock in Fox News' right-wing editorial slant. So that's good news. This is bad news now. According to a UN report on climate, more than 3/4 of Earth's land became persistently drier in recent decades because of us, global warming. And the EPA has banned 2 cancer-causing solvents, PERC and TCE, which, whatever they are, they're used in dry cleaning, but that's a good news. I'm sure the Trump administration is going to unban them and then make us eat those ingredients that are in dry cleaning. And this, the richest deal in sports history. Have you heard about this? Juan Soto, who is a baseball player, he's 26 years old, already proven himself to be among the best hitters in baseball. He agreed to sign a 15-year contract worth almost $1 billion. Well, $765 million with the crosstown New York Mets, the largest deal in professional sports history, breaking a record set just last year by the two-way Los Angeles Dodgers Japanese Dodger star Shohei Ohtani. So this is a pretty crazy story, but the guy that owns the Mets is a hedge fund billionaire, so he can pretty much spend whatever he wants on this. And he is. How about it? All right. Well, those are the headlines for today. Now let's get to some of the audio clips I've got for you. All right, let's just get Bill Clinton out of the way. I'm not a Bill Clinton fan. I don't like the guy, but that doesn't mean he is not worth listening to. Or maybe he's not worth listening to. But still, here's just a little clip of him I found yesterday. He was talking to, I guess, Joe Scarborough. Do we really need to listen to either of these two? Maybe, maybe not, but let's take a turn at it. Here he is explaining that it's the cost of groceries that matters most to elections. I guess we don't really need him to explain it, but let's try it anyway.
Well, the average person believes, whether they voted for President Trump or not the first time, that we survived it.
Unless they or their loved one got COVID and died, but yeah.
They give him perhaps too much credit for the fact that in the first 2.5 years or so of his presidency, the first time, the economy got better. I think the facts are that he inherited the end of the Obama era's recovery. We went from 8 million jobs in Obama's last 2 years to 6.5 million in Trump's first 2 years. But there was no inflation and people felt it. So we had to see that election the way they did and answer that and start with that. So when we didn't answer it, It was like we left the pink elephant in the living room. There is a reason why. We're already the longest continuously existing democracy in history. It's hard to save one. That's fine. But if you're going to fight to save it in an election system,
what's that?
System with all these forces raining down on you, that's the game you got to play. You got to deal with the issues that affect other people's lives. And the same thing's true all around the world. Look at this upheaval is happening. People are losing faith in institutions. And in many, many places, they're going to reward the people that destroyed their faith. I wouldn't bet against America. So far, everybody that's bet against us has lost money. We just got to stay after it.
All right. Well, I don't know who lost money betting against America. I'm sure that was a metaphor for something else. But there is Bill Clinton, whose lisp is getting stronger with age, but that's all right. I only make fun of him because he's seemingly not a great guy. I don't know. Maybe you disagree. But let's go to The View. Let's check in on the ladies of The View, because yesterday we heard both sides of an argument that many of you agree with. You might hear yourself arguing with yourself or somebody else that you care about right now when you hear Whoopi Goldberg and Ana Navarro talking about the urgency of concern given Trump. And I just thought this was really great, except for the fact that they brought up the music, like they were trying to go to commercial, this kind of holiday music, which kind of sucked because otherwise it's a little bit stressful, this conversation, listening to these two women kind of go at each other because it's just always awkward, and then the music makes it worse. But if you can separate that from these 2 points, these are the two wolves kind of arguing on the urgency or the concern that we should have during this period of time right now. Take it away, ladies.
He makes lots and lots and lots of noise. He says he's going to do all these things, and he does this, and I try to say it at least once a week. He does this to keep you all in a panic. He does it to make you all do this and talk about him, and it's so terrible. But all we have to do from now until January 21st is be with our families, be with our kids, do our jobs, make sure our checks don't bounce, make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and our families. Whatever he's going to do, he's going to do, but do take our word for it. Things seem to move slowly because, yeah, they didn't come get Hillary, but he has other people who are ready to go, but I don't think that they can just go out and do what they want to do.
I told you last week I disagree with you when you say that because we have the luxury of saying that because we're legal, we are successful, but if you're an illegal immigrant in this country, you're not going to be not in a panic. If you are a woman working for the Department of Defense, you have a right to be in a panic.
You tell people to stay fraught and like this.
I'm telling people to prepare. Whoopi. I'm telling people,
do you think they're not prepared? They are prepared.
So that means that they can't be relaxing and enjoying Christmas.
No, it doesn't mean that.
When winter is coming.
No, it doesn't. You know what? I'm sorry.
I mean, I disagree.
Winter is here. Right. Winter's been with us. And my point is we can lay down and do nothing for the next 15 days and then be freaking out for the next 4 or 2 years.
To you is we are in a privileged position that a lot of people who are going to be under his attack
are not. Through the same thing.
I want his enemies listed. I'm not panicking. Yeah. Like, we just have to
we have to figure out what we're panicking for. We don't know what we're panicking for. They're throwing 50,000 things at you to make you do this. I'm saying don't buy into that. Do what you have to do. Take care of your family. And when we know what is happening, when we know what we're fighting, we'll get out and fight. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm not saying don't do anything. I'm saying don't be this because nobody can do it.
I think people need to prepare.
Would you like us to stop? All right, we'll be right back.
All right. Yeah, I would like you to stop, but I would like that music to stop. How about that? But thank you, Whoopi. Actually agreed, I think, mostly with what she's saying. I'm not sure I love the way that she said it, but I think it's important. I think it's an interesting debate and conversation to be hearing. I've heard lots of you make both sides of that argument as well. All right, I thought this was interesting and important. On MSNBC, they brought together two of the best health experts in the country. I mentioned them earlier, Wendell Potter and Jonathan Cohn. Here's a conversation that the NBC anchor Katie Tur had with them that I think is relative to the capturing of this guy who assassinated the healthcare executive. This conversation, what does it mean for the conversation around healthcare? Will anything change? I was pretty surprised by the reactions of both of these guests, so I included like the whole almost 5 minutes here.
How quickly this turned from what in the world happened to Brian Thompson to a large contingent of Americans coming out and saying he deserved it?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised. I mean, look, let's be clear. I mean, you don't want to be celebrating somebody's murder. You know, it doesn't justify it in any way. But anybody who's sort of observed the American healthcare system knows there's a lot of people very angry with the healthcare system. A lot of people who can't pay for their healthcare. They can't get the treatment they need. And a big reason why is that a lot of people, especially people with serious medical issues, they have to go through prior authorizations. They have to figure out with their insurance company which doctors they need, which they don't. And when they try to get treatment, they run into these obstacles. The treatments get denied. They can try to appeal it. It takes a long time. Sometimes for some people, it's just a nuisance. For a lot of people, it's a really serious problem. It means they don't get the care they need. They have to pay these enormous bills out of pocket. It's incredibly frustrating. And in the worst cases, it's bad for their health. People are sick. They're suffering, maybe even dying because of this.
Yeah. Everybody has a story about dealing with insurance companies, and not many of those stories, Wendell, are happy stories. The perception is that these companies are not in it to care for people. It's not for the service. It's to squeeze as much money as they possibly can out of individuals. And when push comes to shove, when those individuals need that money back, to delay in order for the person to give up or to get more money out of them. Is that an incorrect perception of how the industry works?
No, it's not at all. It is the correct perception. It's the reality. And it's notable that this murder, this corporate assassination, took place in Manhattan on the day that United Health was holding its investor day. This assailant had to know that was significant, because the reason why we have these delays, why we have this challenge that so many people with health insurance have in getting the care that they need, is because of the slavish devotion of these companies to Wall Street. They have to meet Wall Street's profit expectations every 3 months, and to show them that they are managing expenses. And that means there's greater and greater use of prior authorization, higher out-of-pocket costs before their coverage kicks in, inadequate provider networks. Delays and denials are what people encounter these days increasingly if they have health insurance. And I think it's been just below the surface. I knew when I was in the industry, people despise these companies. They hate dealing with them because they're difficult to deal with. And often they get a no. And it's so hard to figure out what to do when you get that no.
Is this the kind of thing, Wendell, that it's inspiring a conversation out there? I mean, it's got to be eye-opening for the insurance companies. Is it eye-opening for the insurance companies? Would they be surprised at this sort of reaction?
They're not going to be surprised, but this will change them in ways that I think we've never seen anything before do that. They've operated with impunity, and they felt that this rage could always be contained, and that they've spent so much money on propaganda. I used to lead a propaganda shop, on campaign donations, on lobbying expenses, on events like Investor Day to persuade Wall Street we've got this covered. There's a day of reckoning that is happening right now, and I think this has triggered that. This has given people an opportunity or a reason to vent on social media like I've never seen before. It's going to change the way they do business in certain ways. They're going to become more insular. But even back then, I wouldn't tell people what I did for a living. You can be certain these folks are not going to do that either.
Jonathan, do you think this might inspire a change?
I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, we've actually been having versions of this fight for decades, and Wendell knows this as well as anybody. This fight came up in the 1990s. It came up in the fight when there was the fight about the Affordable Care Act. All of this is taking the context of a much broader political fight over how much power to give private insurance companies, the for-profit industry, over how we how we give out health care in this country. And when we get to the point of a political debate, of course, these companies will weigh in on that political debate. They have a lot of power. And what, I think has happened in the past, at least I've observed, is there tends to be a reaction right away. There tends to be a sort of promises of change. But then over time, we see the behavior slip back to what it was.
All right, there you go. Important conversation. We had an important conversation about all of this last night at the Hangout. I'm actually going to try to excerpt that because it was both important and funny about the consequences or the reactions to what this would mean around the conversation around healthcare and whether there would be any reform or behavioral change. So I thought that was interesting. I'll share it. Finally, yesterday, old President Biden announced a new national monument to tell the story of more than 400 boarding schools where tens of thousands of American Indians, Alaskan Natives, Native Hawaiian children were sent for, quote, assimilation. The president said the schools were designed to sever ties between children and their tribal families, their language, and culture. And he formally apologized for the Indian boarding schools back in October, calling it one of the most horrific chapters in history, and announced the new monument during the White House Tribal Nations Summit. And it's a very important issue that I care deeply about, and I wanted to share this, and I applaud the president for doing this.
Over 3/4 of the remaining native languages are in danger of being lost forever. That's why today my administration is moving ahead on a 10-year plan to revive native languages in a serious effort.
All right, I faded down the applause. A little bit more.
It's a vision that works with tribes and support teachers, schools, communities, organizations in order to save native language from disappearing. This matters. It's part of our heritage. It's part of who we are as a nation. It's how we got to be who we are.
All right, just a little bit more, the announcement from yesterday. Again, this is so important, which is why I play it.
Today, we act to continue that healing process. I'm proud to announce we're establishing the historic Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania as a new national monument. I want everyone to know. I don't want people forgetting 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, pretend it didn't happen. The Carlisle Indian School was the first off-reservation federal Indian boarding school for Native children that were taken to, the first one. About 7,800 children from more than 140 tribes were sent to Carlisle, stolen from their families, their tribes, and their homelands. It was wrong. In making the Carlisle Indian School a national monument, we make clear that what great nations do. We don't erase history. We acknowledge it, we learn from it, and we remember so we never repeat it again.
Yeah, wait, was he talking about Trump there at the end? All right, President Biden created a new national monument marking the legacy of Indian boarding schools. Very important stuff, which is why I include it in the important stuff segment. Maybe I should just call it the good stuff, then the important stuff. All right, well, finally, I've got some comedy for you. Jimmy Kimmel was live last night on ABC, and here's a little bit from his monologue.
Have you been following this case of the healthcare killer? On Wednesday of last week, if you don't know, the CEO of United Healthcare was murdered going into a hotel in New York by a guy with a silencer. The killer wrote the words delay, deny, and depose on the bullets. And today, police apprehended a suspect at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. He was said to be carrying a gun. That is the guy. Gun was similar to the one used in the shooting. He had 3 handwritten pages that indicated ill will toward the healthcare industry. He is an Ivy League graduate. His name is Luigi Mangione. And no matter how you feel about this, and people do have different feelings about this, I think we can all agree that no one could have imagined this suspect would have a name as funny as Luigi Mangione. I mean, with a lot of murderers or alleged murderers, when you arrest them, you have to use the middle name. Like, we don't need Luigi Wayne Mangione. It's not necessary. He was arrested after looking suspicious in the McDonald's. Doesn't everyone look suspicious in a McDonald's? Just sitting down and eating there is suspicious at McDonald's. Early reports indicate that the gun used in the shooting may have been created with a 3D printer, which, I'd read it. Had I known this was a real thing, I never would have spent so much time making fun of guys with 3D printers. But the mayor of New York, Mayor Eric Adams, announced the arrest at a press conference today, which is interesting because Mayor Adams himself was arrested in September, and then there he is announcing the arrest of another alleged criminal. It's like that Spider-Man meme. He's like, wait, you? And, of course, the Internet sleuths have been digging up whatever they can on this guy. Someone even found his Goodreads account, where you review books. And one of the books he reviewed is the Unabomber's Manifesto. He gave it 4 stars out of 5. He reviewed the Unabomber, and he reviewed Steve O's autobiography. He gave that one 3 stars. Maybe if Steve-O had written a better book, he'd have just hit the guy in the nuts with a T-ball bat instead.
All right, there you go. Kimmel last night doing it very well. Good stuff. And the important stuff and the funny stuff. There you have it. And now it's time to get to my guest. The guest stuff. The reason that this show is any good at all is because of the impact of our guests on the way that we think through ideas and issues and news that's coming at us from all directions all the time. David Cay Johnston is one of those guys. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist. He's worked at Syracuse. He's now at College of Law. He's now at Rochester Institute of Technology. Most importantly to me, David Cay Johnston has written some very, very important books that have influenced my thinking on some tough, boring issues that I never thought much about, like tax policy, including Free Lunch and Perfectly Legal. Those are 2 of the books that I love the most. But he's also written Divided, The Perils of Our Growing Inequality, and a couple of books about Donald Trump, the making of Donald Trump and the big cheat. How Donald Trump fleeced America and enriched himself and his family. Of course, he knows him professionally, at least, because he would cover him when he was a reporter at the New York Times, which he was for like 17 years. He was a tax policy reporter. This guy is one of the smartest. We love him. Go support dcreport.org. Let's do it right now with David Cay Johnston. Make sure you pronounce the T. You could easily have gone off into retirement, could have gone relaxed. You've done it all. You've accomplished it all. But, sir, we need you now more than ever. Welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me and the kind words, Pete.
I mean that, like, for many reasons. You can talk about policy, so many different policies, but you can also talk about journalism and law and all of it. What are you focused on right now? Just a general question. What are you most focused on right now? What kind of issues are you looking at during this transition to Trump and to another 4 years of this man you know so well as anyone?
For the next 10 days, I'm focused on grading papers of my students at Rochester Institute of Technology. But once I get through that, we need to pay very close attention to what's about to happen here. On Sunday, yesterday, Donald Trump told Kirsten Welker on NBC's Meet the Press that the members of Congress on the January 6th committee that led to his second impeachment should be jailed. And this tells you how Trump thinks. He does not have any understanding of the rule of law. He really believes he's special. And of course, I've known Donald for 36 years. I wrote in 1988 about the prospect that he would become president of the United States. People thought I was nuts back then. But this is unlike anything we've ever had. And unlike the first Trump term, Pete, where Trump didn't expect to win, didn't have a team of any consequence, and is himself an incompetent, utterly incompetent manager. And that's what being president really is. It's a management job. Put time into this, don't put time into that. Give up on this, you're not going to win it. Focus on that, you have a chance of winning it. Donald now has a dedicated team of ideologues, and they are people whose own public statements establish they do not believe in equality, they do not believe in democracy. They believe in rule by the rich, special treatment for folks who have white skin like you and me, white skin privilege, as we used to call it, and an utter disregard for the Constitution. And if you don't take my word for it, take Mitt Romney's. Mitt Romney said, millions of members of my party, he's a Republican, millions of members of the Republican Party don't believe in democracy and our Constitution.
Right. How much are you looking to history and historians who have covered the rise of authoritarians and how autocracy works, because he needs to, and the media that supports him needs to destroy the truth. That's my understanding.
Right. The core of any autocratic regime is control of information. Solzhenitsyn, the great physicist who was one of the opponents in the final days of the old Soviet Union, once said, and I'll probably bollocks this a little, about the Kremlin, we know they're lying. They know we know they're lying. We know they know we know they're lying. And what you want to achieve is you can't trust anything. And Trump has been very successful at this. He's persuaded a lot of people that anything he said by anyone critical of him is a lie. He is the sole source of truth. He has promoted this idea that he is a godlike figure. He has called himself your savior. I alone can save you. And many people, not everybody in America, thank goodness, but many people no longer pay any attention to the news whatsoever. It just came out last week that in those counties, and there are about 3,300 county or county-like jurisdictions in America, in those counties without a newspaper, Trump won 80 to 90% or more of the vote.
Wow.
That just screams about how important it is to have information. Now, I'm afraid that the Washington Press Corps is not up to this. After all, their job has been to cover politics within the well-understood realms of differences between Democrats and Republicans. What you have now in the White House is a convicted felon, a man who believes that he is special. He has said, for example, that as a Christian, he has never once asked God for forgiveness because he's never done a single thing in his life requiring forgiveness. Yeah. So the press corps, I think, is going to be very challenged to cover what he does. And they also need to understand the way Donald speaks in code. So Kirsten Welker of NBC asked Donald, if you think these members of the January 6th committee, Liz Cheney and the others, should be jailed, are you going to tell the FBI and the Justice Department to go after them? And he said, well, that's up to them. Yeah, they listened to him. He's pointed them because they're loyalists. And she just let that slide. She didn't come back and say, given that you pick people who are completely loyal to you, don't you think they'll get the message from what you just said that you want these people pursued?
It's such a good point about how he communicates this as well as anybody. He's always communicated this way, thus to not have necessarily a paper trail or a way to prove that he gave that order. But the people he appoints know exactly what he's expecting. You've seen this over and over with him. So we're going to have...
And the people he's appointing this time are not going to be people like Marine General Kelly, who was his chief of staff, the one who had to explain to him why there is a memorial over the USS Arizona in Pearl Harbor. How you can grow up in America and not know about a date that will live in infamy and what the Japanese did on December 7th, including their screw-up in not telling us in advance as they intended but failed to do, it is just beyond me. But it goes to Donald's appalling ignorance. Donald also said last week, we shouldn't be involved in Syria because we have nothing to do with it. What that tells you is he doesn't know anything about geopolitics. He doesn't have a clue to why Syria is important to the national security of this country, to your safety, to the people watching this, and to my safety.
How closely are you paying attention to what's happening or what is going to happen at the different agencies and departments? You've written all about this. You've covered many of these different federal agencies, how they work, why they do or don't work. So we could take, for example, any that you've written about, obviously the IRS, but you could look at EPA, you could look at SEC. I'm sure David Cay Johnston is thinking a lot about what is going to happen when, again, they put the wolves in charge of the hen house, when they put industry leaders and captains in charge of regulating their own industries.
My best friend David Crook and I started DCReport.org, which is completely free. It has no ads. It depends entirely on donations at the beginning of the first Trump administration, because we felt that the Washington Press Corps they'd cover the politics of things, but they weren't going to get into what they were going to do to the government. And Trump did a lot of damage in his first term. The second book in my Trump trilogy, it's even worse than you think, documents things like a guy whose personnel jacket is just the most flawless personnel jacket you could have, who is turned into a $148,000 a year clerk because he wouldn't bow down to Trump's people. So the Environmental Protection Agency, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Food and Drug Administration, all of these are crucial to your economic and personal welfare. So who's in charge of the FDA? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who thinks that vaccines are harmful. Right. It's just complete nuttiness, and people will die over this. They want to create, just as we have a strategic reserve of petroleum and gold, this administration is talking about creating a Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency reserve. Now, why you would spend real tax dollars to buy fake money is beyond belief. It just doesn't make any sense. But if they do that, it's going to have major repercussions. And my favorite example, Pete, is Trump's tariff issue. So imagine for a moment, Pete, instead of being one of the best comedians I've ever known, that you had gone into the car business and you made Pete cars and you sold them wholesale for $10,000 each and you made a $1,000 profit on every car. Nice business. Trump comes along and says, I'm going to put a 60% tariff on Chinese cars that compete with Pete cars. The dealers for Chinese cars are going to have to raise their price, and they will, to $16,000. You're going to raise your price, too, as a domestic manufacturer. You're going to raise it to probably $15,000 because now you're going to make $6,000 profit on each car you sell, not $1,000. You're going to sell more cars than the Chinese because you're underpricing them, even though you're close to them. And even if your car sales fall by half, you're going to make 3 times as much money. Donald Trump's tariff plan is a scheme to take money out of the pockets of the working class people who voted for him because he said he was their economic savior. It's a scheme to pick their pockets and further enrich his fellow billionaires. And only one, and I emphasize the word one, national journalist or economist besides me has said what I just told you, and that's David Wessel. He used to be at the Wall Street Journal, and then only in passing on NPR. There should be big page one stories, nightly news reports that Donald Trump's tariff scheme will raise domestic prices. But, of course, a lot of the people who write about economics, just like every other subject, are generalists. They don't know economics. They don't know how tariffs really work. And they're beholden to their sources. And so they tell you what their sources tell them, and they're accurate about that. But they don't have a theoretical or principle-level knowledge of what they report about.
Right, which is why I love reading your work and people like Dean Baker, who writes Beat the Press on economic reporting, right, and other economists, which are really important.
And Dean is an avowed liberal, but I'll tell you the important thing about Dean. He pays attention to the basic principles in economics. Things like something called accounting identities that are always true. An accounting identity is something that's just 2 + 2 = 4 as long as you're in base 10. And he's very careful to make sure he sticks to well-established points. And then he's terrific at telling you, here's how dumb this policy is. Here's how bad the reporting was in the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal on this or that issue or the New York Times. He's really an important source of understanding economic news in America.
And on that note, I love Dean. I have him on all the time. I'll get him back soon, maybe this week. When you look at, you were just talking about the tariffs effect on the economy, and the other ideas that Trump certainly has been talking about imposing are this mass deportation and a tax cut. Given the state of the economy right now, you can characterize what you think of the economy is right now, David, but it would seem that those 3 policies would have such a detrimental effect on the economy. Tariffs, deporting the people who are doing so much of the very, very important work, and, of course, another tax cut for people who don't need it.
Well, and let me just give an example of the kind of ancillary issues that aren't being discussed. If we deport large numbers of people who are in the country without permission or with partial permission, the price of food will go up. If they start raiding slaughterhouses, which are owned 90% of the pork, beef, and chicken is a handful of companies, the prices of those are going to go up. You have to tend crops year-round, not just harvest them. price of food will go up. So it's, I think, terribly important to set a baseline with people, to make them understand how well we're doing. The American economy right now is booming. Donald Trump they said Sunday, we had the best economy ever. We absolutely did not. In the D.C. report, we documented this, that he had sub-average performance, subpar performance for the whole post-World War II era. And each year he was in office, the economy grew at a slower rate, which is not the trend line you want to have. Donald has persuaded people they're in terrible shape. And people blame Biden for things that he has nothing to do with. A good example is the price of eggs went up for a while after the COVID lockdowns ended. It came back down to below where it was under Donald Trump when you adjust for inflation. And then it soared back up. Right now, eggs are pretty expensive. Why? Because avian flu got into these huge industrial laying hen operations, and we had to kill 100 million laying hens. Right. There are only 384 million laying hens before that. So more than a quarter of these birds were killed. Of course, your price of eggs is going to go up, and Joe Biden has nothing to do with it, nor does Donald Trump. But Trump is masterful at blaming people for things they didn't do and diverting people from accountability for things they did do if they're his friends.
And, of course, taking credit for just about anything he wants and dismissing blame for just about anything he wants. And somehow he gets away with it, which is what makes it also maddening. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you for your reaction from any angle to the murder in cold blood of the CEO of a health insurance company. You've also written plenty about healthcare economics and so on. Then the interesting thing about it is the reaction about how people not only don't care, they're literally rooting for an assassin. And that, of course, is as a reflection of how insidious our health insurance industry is. What do you want to say in reaction to the state of healthcare, and what, if anything, is going to change under a Trump administration with Republicans in the lead?
Yeah, Pete, I think this assassination also reflects the Trumpian influence of disregard for the rule of law. And that this happened, I am not surprised. There have been too many cases over too many years of insurance companies denying care on what I think are unreasonable grounds. In my book, Free Lunch, I quote Dr. Linda Pino, a Kentucky physician, who testified under oath before Congress that every time she killed a patient by denying health care, such as a heart transplant, she got a bonus. They literally paid bonuses to her to kill people. And this didn't catch on with the public. Instead, the public discussion was, oh, if we have Medicare for all, there'll be government death squads. No, we have corporate death squads. And this company in particular, United Health, which insures about 1 in 5 Americans, and of those who have insurance, therefore, it's an even bigger number, closer to 1 in 4. But they have become incredibly tough in recent years on 2 fronts. One is just denying a care, saying you don't need that, or your doctor's wrong, or your doctor's choice of this prescription medicine for you, we're not going to give you that. You're going to have to take this other medicine until you can prove it doesn't work and you're sicker. And then secondly, tying people up with paperwork until they give up. I saw an interview the other day with some people who lost their house. They eventually got paid, not in full, but substantially paid by United Health. But they delayed for so many years, these people lost their home. This is a totally superfluous business. There is no reason, Pete, to have health insurance. So and let me give you one number I hope people watching this keep in their minds about how wasteful the American non-system sick care system is. We don't have a health care system. We have a non-system sick care system.
Right.
The French have, according to every medical sociology study I've seen, and I've used the French healthcare system and have friends who have, is the best in the world. It is better than ours. The Germans is just essentially equal. It's a different system, but it's almost equal. If we spent the same share of our economy on healthcare as the French and the Germans, we could have everybody covered. We only have 90% covered and really only 70 because a lot of people have crummy health insurance. People would be seen quicker by doctors. Our health status as a society would be better. And we would save 6.1% of GDP. That's a meaningless number. Does that number mean a thing to you, 6.1% of GDP?
I mean, it does. It does, because I've studied
It's a big number. It's a big number, but can you visualize that in your head? I can't, and I work with these every day. Here's how to make that number meaningful. 6.1% of GDP is all the income taxes paid by everyone in America who makes less than $50,000 a month or $600,000 a year or more. And we have people in this country, remember, who have multi-billion dollar annual incomes, but through tax shelters, both legal and illegal, avoid paying any taxes. But all else being equal, as the economists like to say, if we adopted the French healthcare system, no one would go bankrupt, no one would lose their home, everyone would get the care they need, and you wouldn't pay income taxes until your income reached $600,000 a year. That's what it's costing us to maintain this system. And Donald has signaled that what they're likely to do, if they can get the votes, is repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and then have nothing to replace it. And people will die if they do that. Lots of people.
Yeah,
one of my sons will die because he's an entrepreneur. He owns a small business. He won't be able to get any health care because he's had stents, and he'll die.
Yes, people with pre-existing conditions or go bankrupt. By the way, I saw this statistic shared by Judd Legum, who I'm sure the collective net worth of America's richest 12 men is now over $2 trillion. The bottom 50% of Americans have a collective net worth of $3.82 trillion. Wow.
I don't think the bottom 50% have that much. That sounds very high to me. The concentrated wealth at the top is beyond all reason. Unless you're a deal maker like Carl Icahn, there's no value. There's no what economists call marginal utility in these fortunes. Unless you gamble it away, you cannot spend an income of billions of dollars a year. And we should be taxing those at a very high level, and we're not. Because of this ideology that it's all for the rich. Bill Gates said the other day that if America had what he called a proper tax system, his fortune would be one size the third it is. But one size the third it is, he'd still have $50 billion.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I do have to ask you, you mentioned how we could save money on healthcare by having a different system, obviously. What do you make of this Department of Government Efficiency being run by Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, who have no idea what they're doing and they're con artists? Right. You, however, do understand how the federal government works, the budget works. You understand about fraud and waste, fraud, and abuse, and realize that it gets big headlines, but it's really not that much, even if you cut all the waste, fraud, and abuse. And by the way, if you deregulate the agencies who are supposed to find the fraudulent people, the SEC, the IRS, and EPA, you're going to find even less fraud because the people are supposed to be looking for it. So what do you make of this government efficiency? It sounds great. It sounds really great. DOGE, the Government Efficiency Agency.
First of all, there is no department. This is just a fiction. It's Donald Trump's life is a fiction. He creates his own reality, and he lives in this fictional world in his head, and a lot of people have decided they want to live in that same fictional world. There is no department. I don't believe Congress will create such a department. These are two guys who will, however, have Donald Trump's ear. And Donald has appointed loyalists at places like the Office of Management and Budget. Now, in the case of Elon Musk, he has $13 billion of contracts with the taxpayers. In the modern era, behind many great fortunes lies taxpayer money. And he's going to be in charge now of efficiency and waste and regulation. If you're Boeing, you should watch out because Boeing competes with Elon Musk in space matters. And you can bet your bottom dollar that Musk is going to do his best to harass his competitor through this fictional DOGE agency. There isn't the kind of money that people think is out there to be had. We do not buy $600 toilet seats in the military. That's covering up black box projects like when they built stealth jet bombers and jet fighters and hiding the money. Every military quartermaster, every sergeant who's the quartermaster somewhere will tell you he doesn't have enough money to do all the things they want him to do, despite this enormous amount of money we spent. What are you going to do? Cut the FBI. Okay, the FBI has two parts. One is to protect us in national security. That's going to be under very big assault from the Trumpers. And the other is criminal activity in the U.S. You want to cut the FBI, do it, but understand that what you're doing is helping criminals, terrorists, and hostile foreign nations. You want to cut the FDA. Okay, that means you're going to have more people get food poisoning, get drugs that are dangerous, and people are going to die. It's not like we take the tax dollars you pay, put it on a garbage scow, go out in the Atlantic Ocean and dump it. That money is spent and it recirculates through the economy. And all wealthy nations, look around the world, there's plenty of data on the internet you can find. All wealthy nations have high taxes. Why? Because private wealth creation depends on public investments. If you're in the hotel business, if you're old man Conrad Hilton, he wrote in his will about how building roads and airports was what made him rich because people traveled and they needed hotels.
Right.
And if you stop spending money on this, then you're going not to have the same level of prosperity in the country. The real issues we need to be working on are people who are paid way too little money. If pay had kept up with productivity, the median wage of about $43,000. Remember, half of Americans make less than $43,000 a year. They'd be making somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000.
Right.
And we wouldn't have all this economic distress. But the Trump plan, what did Donald say? He said many times, wages are too high. How people think he's the champion of working people when he says wages are too high is indicative of the poor level of critical thinking skills in America, the poor level of sophistication about politics in America compared to other countries. And so, Pete, I watch very carefully. I do think the Democrats, while they should make noise, should basically let Trump be Trump. LTBT, let Trump be Trump, LTBT, because if he does what he says he's going to do, it will tank the economy, it will lead to people dying, and if the news about that gets out and the Democrats do a good job in Congress in their minority position, if the news media covers these things, people will hopefully wake up and go, oh, wait a minute, the good old days were during the Biden administration, which they were vastly better than during Trump.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Let Trump be Trump. Love it. David Cay Johnston, we are going to need you more than ever before. Keep up the good work, and I hope that you'll be able to check in with me again real soon.
Absolutely, Pete, and go make some people laugh. We need it.
On it. All right, there you go. David Cay Johnston, one of the best. We love whenever he joins us, and we'll be talking to him a lot more, I think, in the future. Thank you very much for tuning in, for pressing play, for writing a review, for your paid subscriptions. You bumblebees listening all the way to the end, you're the best. All right, well, look for me today at noon with Michael Cohen live on youtube.com/standupwithpete. Hopefully I'll get it right today, as well as several other platforms. I should be on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram if I can figure it out. We'll see. I may fail. No pressure. It's all good. If I'm there, I'm there. If I'm not, I'll figure it out the next day. Thank you guys so much for your support, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. JohnCarroll.org. Go buy his music. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil